What's going on, everyone? I am Josh Rogers, DEI manager, culture maven, and digital storyteller, and I'm super excited to be back for part four of our Road to AfroTech series, Embracing the Change, Uniting for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We're going to have an amazing conversation around the future of DE&I and its innovative practices. And if you've been with us for the last three sessions, you know that we've laid a lot of groundwork. We've talked about why DEI is important, some of the strategies for implementation, what it means to have really inclusive cultures, right, as related to our DEI efforts, and even thinking through what DEI means from a leadership and executive perspective, how it impacts our company cultures, and how that kind of top-down support really builds up the cultures and organizations that we're a part of. So if you have not been able to join us for the last three, it is okay. You can go back and watch them. They are available on demand, and I promise you, you'll have some gems or some amazing takeaways. And you can also have on-demand access after this conversation is finished as well. As an additional note, because we are on the road to AfroTech, I want to encourage everyone here to please consider registering. If you haven't already, you should just be coming to AfroTech Conference November 1st through the 5th, right there in Austin, Texas. You can go to afrotech.com and click on the events tab, and it'll lead you to where you need to register. So hopefully I will see many of you in Austin. And then, as in one more additional note before we go into the conversation, we will also be having a Q&A portion toward the end of this panel discussion or this fireside chat that we're calling it. So if you have any questions that are just on your heart right now, go ahead and put them in the Q&A section. If something sparks your heart or, hits your brain while we're in the middle of the conversation, go ahead and put it there, and we'll be sure to try to get to them as soon as we can during that session. With all of that being said, understood, and accepted, I'm ready to get into this conversation. We have two amazing panelists who are here. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. So we will start with Lauren Collins, and then we'll proceed with Reggie Williams.
Thank you, Josh. And hello, everyone. I'm Lauren Collins Scott. I'm the Chief Impact Officer at IDEO. My remit really focuses on all things diversity, equity, inclusion, and also recently sustainability and climate. I'm based in Atlanta, super excited to be here today. Most of my career has been focused in strategy, innovation, design, and that's the lens that I try to bring to this work. It's very iterative, it's very human-centered, and I'm always looking to try new things.
Awesome.
Wow. Thank you, Lauren. It's Reggie Willis, and I am the Chief Diversity Officer at Ally Financial. I've been in this role for the past 7 years and spent the previous 22 years in risk roles. So maybe very suitable for this work in the past 3 years, since it has had its fair share of risk, which I'm sure we'll get to in the conversation. But I am responsible for all things diversity, equity, and inclusion here at Ally. In particular, really focusing on making sure we create an environment where people have a tremendous sense of belonging, where they feel like there's purpose in the work that they do, and obviously making sure that once you get here that there are equitable opportunities and that folks feel like they have access to, achieve their goals from a career perspective. And I'm located in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Awesome. Super glad to have you both. We're going to jump right into it. I think by now, most of the individuals understand what diversity, equity, and inclusion is, right? And I think we also understand, or at least have some type of knowledge around the ever-evolving landscape that impacts DE&I, right? Whether you want to look at that from an optimistic perspective or a more pessimistic perspective, it is evolving. What would you say are some of the best ways to implement DEI strategies that are future-focused, considering the landscape that we're in? Lauren, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Josh, for the question. I really think DEI strategies are quite similar to business strategies. And so I am a sucker for a framework. I love using frameworks to create strategies, to implement strategies. And two of my go-tos are Play to Win and Theory of Change. There are books on both of these, tons of free resources online, but they both focus on starting with the vision. So you're asking about implementation for future-focused strategies. And both of these frameworks will have you kind of take a step back and identify what's your North Star. A lot of people have heard that kind of language before. With Play to Win, it focuses more on the components. So if you think about management systems, if you think about, where to play, how to win, these are the things that Play to Win helps you explore so that you can see, to get to that 3, 5, 10-year vision, you have to take all these components into consideration. Versus Theory of Change focuses more on the steps you need to take and the shifts you'll need to make organizationally. to create that vision or bring it to life, if you will. So after you move past the framework, for me, again, DEI strategy should be treated the same as business strategy. So use a framework, set time-bound, measurable goals, make sure you have the right people, stakeholders, influencers, and frankly, even people who aren't influencers but need to be engaged. And when it comes to that, I would go broader than some of the, kind of the obvious groups, not just your leadership team and not just ERGs. Like think about caretakers, think about people who are newer to the organization, think about people who, are long tenured in the organization, and get all of those voices as inputs for part of that strategy implementation. And then two things that I feel like people often forget, especially with long-term strategies, but I feel like this is particularly important for DEI strategy implementation, is to celebrate milestones and acknowledge learnings. DEI work is a journey, as we all know. It's not that it's slow, it's that it never ends and it's constantly evolving. And so to keep people engaged, especially leadership, especially people who might not necessarily be begging for that work to happen, you have to show them that you are making progress and you have to show them that you're learning along the way. At IDEO, we developed, if I can humor y'all for a second, this framework called Sizzles, Fizzles, and Izzles. It's something that my team came up with just to kind of frankly normalize the nonlinear journey that is all things diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so what we do after different initiatives or after different things that we tried is we take a pause moment and ask people to reflect on a sizzle, a fizzle, and an izzle. So a sizzle, we all know sizzle reels. It's a highlight. It's something that worked really well. A fizzle is something that didn't go that great, but we want to learn from failure. And so we're going to acknowledge that thing. And then an izzle is, it's not good. It's not bad. It's just something that is worth capturing so that the next time we do something, we can just, have that piece of information.
Got it. Reggie, anything you want to add to that?
I was just writing down that gem. I like that one. That was great. We do something similar. We have a rosebud thorn, which is probably folks probably have heard that before, but similar in concept. I think Lauren's answer was spot on. The one thing I would add is, like Lauren said, we can't do this work in a vacuum. So folks who feel like D&I or DE&I happens in, with a small, mighty team, you've got to realize that much like business imperative, you've got to get inputs from across the board and having, we've got a terminology we talk about seeing around corners here at Ally. And so I've got a team of people that help me see around corners. And it's really about getting the inputs from maybe some unlikely suspects, right? Talking to your technology lead, talking to your, ER person who may be hearing things, just so you've got a kind of a 360 view of all the things that could be a potential input of what's ahead of us, right? What's around the next corner, and how are you either adapting your existing strategy to it or realizing that you've got to, maybe change course completely. I think the real, the one thing that I would tell folks is, and to what Lauren, just to amplify what Lauren said, this is a journey, right? I liken it to running a marathon. And, 7 years in, I feel like maybe I'm probably just getting my legs loose and kind of hitting a stride of some sorts, but understanding there's still, work ahead, and you've got to be patient with, you might not hit your splits on every mile, but you've got to realize that you're still in the race and you're still running. And so be comfortable with what might not seem like progress, and understand that there is a long-term play to this. And it's not always going to, I tell folks I have just as many losses as I do wins. And if you don't celebrate the wins, you feel like you only get losses. So I think it is important to celebrate the wins and understand that it's going to be, not everything's going to work in our favor, right? There are folks who are appreciative of the status quo, so they're going to engage in different ways. And so you've got to be ready to continue to stay, in the fight, so to speak. But it's, I think it's worthy work. So.
Absolutely. And Lauren, I love the fact that you talked about it as a journey, because it is so, right? We're never going to stop learning. We're never going to, I think, reach a point of completion. I've often said in different conversations, what could be progress today could be regression tomorrow, right? So we have to keep evolving and keep learning. And Reggie, you were spot on, even calling it a journey, because DEI work is not for the faint at heart, right? I've been asked before, how did I come to be so passionate about this work? My original response is, I'm a Black man. Like, this is my lived experience. But even beyond that, right, we have to also talk about the fatigue that sometimes come with this journey, living the experience every day, and then going in and doing the work. And in that, I kind of want to shift the conversation to learning from a future focused perspective. How do we encourage other DEI practitioners, right? Or just those within our organizations to kind of stay ahead of the curve as much as possible? What are some learning practices that you would encourage people to employ? Reggie, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah. Read, listen, and really find those sources, right? So if there's a podcast, if there's a book that's out, new book, like just stay current. And so as a part of our team's efforts, like we're always responsible for bringing one new piece of literature to each one of our team meetings every week. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on DE&I. It could be about AI, right? Which has implications to DE&I, right? It could be around, the election, right? Just anything that we think is worthy of conversation that could be an input to what we are doing. I think that's critically important. And listen, ask questions, get involved, get engaged with your workforce, and ask the folks that are new to the organization what their expectation was, right? Many times I talk to new employees and I ask them, did we get what we sold you, right? Did you get what we did we make real, that vision or that expectation? And you get some great answers because they're not jaded, they're still fresh, and they're going to tell you where you fell down or where you outpaced their expectations. So I think that's important. But it all really comes down to being willing to, especially you mentioned being a Black man, getting outside of my own lived experience and realizing that this work is beyond just our own lived experience. So only taking the vision of the viewpoint of a Black man in this work is only going to include a certain portion. And if we're true to what we're saying, we should create an environment where everyone that is in our buildings feel included. So that's going to, be people who don't share that same lived experience that you have.
Yeah. Lauren?
I think that's so spot on, Reggie, especially just getting out of your own lived experience. Black women are often seen as the most marginalized in organizations, depending on the topic, but not always, right? We're having conversations about accessibility. We're having conversations about caretakers, about immigrants. And so you have to be attuned to all those experiences if you're going to be practicing this work. I think another great way for practitioners to stay ahead of the curve is frankly just to be in conversation. Is exactly what we're doing right now. It is, getting outside of your own team, your own organization to understand how other people are dealing with this work, how they're solving problems. Also, frankly, from a mental health perspective, it's healing and fueling to be around like company and realize like, you're not only doing this, you're not the only person doing this work. And it's great to be around like-minded people who are having similar challenges, but also who are having successes, and you can continue to learn from them. I think the other thing, just to build on what Reggie said, is just to have that open conversation and dialogue with employees at the organization, and to have everything from pre-established rituals wherever you're having forums or poll surveys, those kind of things. But also, frankly, like the success of this work is based on the relationships we have with people in the organization. They have to trust us. They have to be willing to talk to us. They have to be willing to surface the hard things and frankly say to us like the spiciest things in the organization that they might not feel comfortable saying to another leader. But also we want to hear those things before people exit the organization. And so just even being self-reflective and realizing like, how can I make myself more accessible and more open, and also realize the power dynamics, right? Because we are in senior roles. And so we have to put that invitation out for people to come to us is really important.
No, I love that, having that accessibility piece. And I think there are so many letters that can be added to DE&I. Some people add the J for justice, right? The A for accessibility. And again, I think that speaks to the journey where every company, every organization may be in a different space and may be conceptualizing it, right, in different ways. But when we go back to the root of how a lot of our departments started, right? Many organizations were doing this type of work pre-George Floyd, right? But a lot of them started after the unfortunate murder of George Floyd. But since then, we've also seen some companies pull back, right, from that initial commitment. How do you think, Lauren, this exodus that we're seeing will affect the future of DEI within organizations?
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate, Josh. And, it kind of started off as a slow thing, and then it seemed like it was every single headline. A lot of folks, unfortunately jumping onto the bandwagon. And I think this is the moment that's telling us, who's authentically and generally in this work and who was doing it because everyone else is doing it. Now they're leaving because everyone else is leaving. So, from the company perspective, this is actually the moment to double down on your commitments. It's the time to become more vocal about them, not necessarily just, take the air cover that's being provided by other folks that are exiting. But nonetheless, the long-term impact, it's a ripple effect. It starts with leadership pulling back on their commitment, which then turns into investment and resources being pulled away from the work, which makes it then harder to do the work in the first place. And frankly, it also makes people a bit wary to do the work and a little less, giving of their time. Like Reggie mentioned earlier, certainly we have DEI departments, but it takes every single function of the organization, every single level of leadership to truly be engaged here. And if people see leadership deprioritizing, defunding this work, frankly, it makes it a lot easier for them to not engage. And if we don't have engagement, we don't have investment, we don't have resources, then we don't have participation. And then we don't have progress. And then we'll start to see the headlines about how little progress is being made, or how, maybe this isn't worth the investment, but the investment isn't necessarily being made. So, it's a dark long-term view, to be honest, to think about it that way. But that's what comes up for me when I think about it.
Got it. Reggie, any perspective you want to add there?
I think Lauren hit the nail on the head around it. Really shows why organizations got in this work to begin with. And if you believe that it's the right thing to do, it's still the right thing to do. And if you believe that it made your company better, it should still make your company better on whatever, measurement of better is, whatever, if it's return on investment, if it's your, engagement scores, your customer scores, whatever it is. I think that if you pull away from it now, it is the time that you should be thinking about doubling. What more can we do? And maybe it takes a different, maybe it looks different because of people feeling fearful of retaliation, or fearful of a lawsuit, or fearful of, you name what you believe could happen if you continue down the path. And I tell people all the time, I don't care what my title is, as long as I'm doing the same work, right? As long as I'm creating this environment, as long as I'm creating equitable opportunities, the title doesn't dictate the work. And that's what I think is important, is that too many organizations got into this because it was what they thought was going to garner some sort of positive response from the masses, and they weren't doing it for the right reasons. And that's why you see folks pulling back just as quickly. But I do think that companies that you saw committed before George Floyd's murder are still committed today. And the ones that are truly doing it because they felt a true change in their being because of what they saw in that 9 minutes. I think that's what is creating, hopefully, continued momentum in this work. But again, that journey, you can't belittle the fact that this is a journey, and there are going to be times where you gotta rest, right? But you got to keep going at some point.
No, absolutely. I believe in that we have the right to be tired, but we should never tire out, right? Because this work has to keep going. It has to progress. And even in that, I think a lot of times we think about our DEI imperatives as internal work. But Reggie, we spoke a little bit about just a little offline about some community partnerships. And I kind of want to lean into that a little bit. How has the work that you're thinking about with your organizations concerning DE&I, how have community partnerships helped you realize some of the metrics or the goals, right, that you're seeking to accomplish as it relates to those strategies?
Yeah, I think that for us, it's been a maturing process. When we first started this work a little over 7 years ago, I think it was very internally focused. What can we do to make sure our employees feel a certain way? But we very quickly realized that if you believe in this work and you feel that it's imperative, it's got to go beyond your four walls. And you do have a responsibility to make sure you're letting this go further and into the communities you do business. So a lot of our community partners, we have been very intentional about establishing relationships and not just making, when you think about philanthropic donations, not just giving money to people, but making sure that the money that we're giving to these not-for-profits are going to, Black and Hispanic and Latino and women-led organizations. So that have a close tie to the communities they're trying to impact. So it's not just about giving, dollars. It's about knowing that the dollars you are giving are going to informed places, right? So it's not just about being able to show a dollar sign on your web page about your commitment, but it's really about empowering the people who are closest to the groups that you are trying to impact. And that's been a big shift for us over the past 4 or 5 years, and it's made a significant difference in our ability to impact those communities, right? Here in Charlotte, we are engaged in with one of our local colleges where we are funding a program that is bridging technology, right? So we're providing access to what would typically be underserved high schools and getting them access to opportunities to go to a college here in the Charlotte area. And we are funding and one of the partners that understand that, again, I think you mentioned it, Lauren, access is critically important. And this is a part of giving those students access to an education that they might not otherwise have access to.
Thanks, Lauren. Any conversation around community partnerships and how your internal DEI strategies impact that externally?
Absolutely. We depend a lot on community partnerships, and frankly, they really help us deliver work both internally and externally. Internally, everything from developing programming to matching our folks with outside coaches and creating self spaces for them, to also frankly helping with strategy development and design. And they've also helped us be a catalyst for change in the organization. So there are a couple organizations we work with. One is called Represent Ed out of the Bay. And they are an amazing organization that provide opportunities for students after college. And we work with them on students that are interested in getting into design. So BIPOC students. And so we have a fellowship. We're in the second year of it. And so these students, professionals, young professionals join IDEO and participate in this fellowship where they're designers, they're on design projects, they have mentors, they come in as a cohort, so they have a little bit of community as well. And it's been great for them, but it's been amazing for us. It's bringing different perspectives that we might not necessarily get through our own recruiting means. And then another partnership that I'm really a bit more involved with and super passionate about is one we have with Cities United. After George Floyd's murder, we were really looking for what's the best way for us to authentically get in this conversation. Social justice work is not core to our mission. It's not core to our organization's history, but design is. And so we were looking for opportunities where we could leverage design in this space. And Cities United is an organization that is really focused on ending the homicide epidemic and among Black men and boys in those communities, and working with different mayors to create networking and offer frameworks and just like programs and processes to evolve them. And so we were able to essentially insert some of our employees in their organization to help catalyze a brand redesign and make it easier for them to explain their work, which makes it easier for them to get grants and funding, and also just, again, expand that network. We've been in that partnership for over 2 years now. We've done quite a few projects with them, and it's been really fulfilling in the sense that any of our designers that get a chance to work on these projects say it's the most important work they've ever done in their life. They're so proud, of working on this work. And then we get learnings internally because we learn, frankly, how differently this nonprofit works and how they engage with their stakeholders. And our designers become, frankly, more humble, more patient, and really more creative because they're seeing, how these folks work and really important work, and gives us a chance to touch something that we wouldn't, be able to do otherwise.
Absolutely. I love that because although, to your point, Lauren, a lot of times some of the work that can happen externally is not core to the mission, I think what's important is that a lot of those external concepts affect employees internally, right? So if we're looking to provide spaces that are safe and brave, I struggle with the safe space concept because sometimes it lacks accountability there. But we're looking to provide safe and brave spaces for our employees and those who work for these organizations, having things that connect them back to what matter outside of work, I think is critically important as well. But I kind of wanted to follow up on something that both of you mentioned when we talk about like having things that connect to specific groups. Lauren, you mentioned BIPOC individuals specifically. What would you say to people, as a follow-up question to all of that, what would you say to people who are saying, DEI isn't for me because they're only focused on Black people or they're only focused on women, right? We know that it's inclusive, but sometimes the programming, the work does not speak to that in one particular space. What would you say to people who are only pointing out that you're working with specific marginalized groups when in fact it is for everyone?
Well, I would hope that most of us are not just focused on those groups. I think allyship and accomplishment work is super important in organizations. And when we first started our ERG program, we had a lot of our BIPOC employees looking at us saying, "What are the white people doing?" Quite plainly, right? We have them organizing and doing all this work on the side, but that's taken away from them being able to do work shares and be able to volunteer in a different way. And so rightfully so, they were asking, where's the accountability on the other side? And so we started developing allyship and accomplishment work to bring folks into the work and help them understand, like, this is for everyone. Everyone's work looks different though. My work as a Black woman looks different than your work as a white man. And so I think helping everyone see that the work is broader than just your identity. It's just how does your identity, serve your piece of the pie and the work that we're all responsible for.
Yeah. Reggie, any perspective?
I love that answer. I think Lauren's is spot on. And I've challenged, because I think many times you hear white males say that they don't see themselves in this work, and I've challenged them, or I'm not diverse, right? You hear that, and I challenge them on that one point to say, okay, so if you're telling me you're not different, then you are the norm. And what does that mean when you set yourself up as the norm? You are now saying that you are the benchmark that everyone else needs to be measured against. And I said that in and of itself is going to put you at odds with this work. So I would challenge you to rethink yourself as you're only diverse in the context of the people that you're in the room with. So if you are in the room full of Black men and women, then you are diverse as a white male. So you have to get beyond just the kind of the insular view of what diversity and inclusion is, or just the idea of it being about race or ethnicity or gender, because there is many ways that you can find yourself in the work, as Lauren said, and whether that's being an ally or understanding that the fact that you are colorblind is in and of itself a disability. So you can find a home there. If you are a caregiver to someone who has a disability, you can find yourself in the work. If you have children that are female, you can find yourself in the work, because you should be advocating for a place that they can find success in. With about 20% of our younger generations identifying as LGBTQ, the odds on your children may be identifying in that space as they start to mature and understand who they are. So you can always find yourself in the work if you're willing to. So whether that is as an ally or finding your own unique difference. And so anyone who says they can't find themselves in the work, I challenge them fairly sternly, because I think it's BS, because this work does encompass everyone, especially if you are thinking about truly being inclusive, then that in and of itself should take care of everyone in the organization.
No, absolutely.
Josh, if I could, Josh, can I add one thing? This makes me think about actually when I first came to IDEO. Like, I am a very self-proclaimed introvert, and I came to the most extroverted organization on this planet. And it was a huge shift for me and a huge struggle. I mean, I was struggling to get work done. I was struggling to concentrate, imposter syndrome out of this world. And I started a conversation around introversion. And again, thought I was the only person. When I started this conversation, half the people in the studio raised their hand. And we started talking and realized what I experienced, everyone else was experiencing, but they were just experiencing it, suffering in silence, frankly. And so we started designing different ways that we could work that were more introvert friendly, started setting different expectations for the way that we travel from a consulting perspective, to the way that presentations are made, to the way that we have brainstorms, et cetera. And one of the biggest and best outcomes of that for me was the extrovert saying, oh, we actually like this heads down time thing too. Oh, we actually appreciate not being expected to go to dinner every single night on the road as well. And so I share that story just to say another anecdote here, in addition to, helping people see their own, piece of the pie, if you will, in the work as a DEI practitioner, helping people experience and feel the difference when everyone is included, and lifting up those stories, I think is super important too.
No, I absolutely love both of those perspectives, because what I heard, Reggie, specifically when you were calling BS, I know we like to say a call in, but sometimes we call in to call out, right? So that they can be aware, right, of the missing of the nuances and things like that, especially with the whole colorblind piece. If you don't see my color, you don't see me, right? And all the other ways that I could possibly identify, right? You're not seeing me. And even in that, I love that, you know, the extroverts came back and said that this actually worked for us, because I was doing a study even on the dips that we see like on sidewalks. And originally, they were made for wheelchair accessibility. But what they found was is that when they made it for the accessibility of the people in that community, it also helped skaters, cyclists, those with walkers, right? Those who were pushing carts, right? So providing space, right? Levels, pieces of inclusion and equity for one group typically benefits so many other groups that may not have saw themselves. So when they were bucking up against something, right? They didn't realize that they were going to get benefits from this particular resource as well. Before we go into the next question, I want to pause real quick and let everyone know that if you have a question, you are welcome to put them in the question and answer portion, and we'll be sure to get to them. But speaking to, we talked a little bit about having that space for equity. And I think what you both talked about was that's a sense of belonging. It makes me feel like I belong here when I'm seen, when resources are developed toward me and how I identify. And when we think about belonging, some people see AI as a threat to that, right? It's taking over jobs, right? This technology is coming in. What does that mean? Talk to us a little bit about, Lauren, we'll start with you, AI and its implications as it relates to equity in the workforce.
Yes. Yes, we've all seen the headlines. AI is coming for all of us and all of our jobs. You know, I have to be honest. I think of all the jobs and all the departments, folks that work in DEI are probably a little bit more okay than others. Just because, frankly, I mean, the work that we do is about people. It's super human centered, right? And a lot of the early things that we have seen about AI are the flaws that it has related to bias, right? AI is just mimicking human behavior and human mindsets, which we know are inherently biased. Now, it doesn't mean that AI is completely bad. And in fact, I think that the pattern recognition that comes from this technology can be super helpful. It can make us all more efficient. It's already made me more efficient and my team more efficient. We did an employee engagement survey recently, you know, something that we've done previously. The last time we did an employee engagement survey, we manually went through thousands of comments and did the pattern recognition by hand and by Post-it and by Sharpie. It took forever. This time, we had developed an internal AI tool at IDEO that is used for different things internally, and we were able to use that tool to synthesize the qualitative comments for for our survey, and also train the AI to focus on specific identities. So you're talking about equity. We were able to actually look across the data and see who was experiencing the organization the worst on different topics, you know, be it inclusion, trust, leadership, etc., and use the AI to do that synthesis in a fraction of the time, but still, again, able to focus on equity from that lens. And what that allowed us to do was still do that same synthesis step, but then it allowed us to do additional intersectional analysis and focus on our storytelling in a way that was more digestible for the organization. So it didn't necessarily, you know, erase us or our jobs. It just made us more efficient and allowed us to do more. And I think that, you know, certainly some kinks still to be worked out, but at least for right now, I think it can actually help us, especially as resources are being reduced, help us be more efficient.
Okay. Reggie?
Yeah, no, Lauren, those are some great points. And similar to you, I remember painfully going through several thousand comments and trying to find the thread that binded them or made them. So yes, we have similar technology now to be able to do a lot of bucketing and understanding and slicing, quite frankly, the data to be to help educate and understand where do we have true opportunities, where do we have the ability to find the nuance that would have been much more difficult to find without having the resources. But I think to Lauren's point, the two things I'm concerned about around AI is it just going to exacerbate the bias that already exists because of the folks that are actually doing the coding for the AI resources, right? So that's one concern. The other one is, how do you get ahead of it, right? Because I do think that it can be extremely additive to, marginalized communities. If we start to figure out how to enable and be on the front end of this, how does that then, allow us to close some of the historic gaps in, creating wealth and having access to opportunities and being able to ensure that this isn't something that widens that gap, right? So how are we being intentional about not just saying, oh, it's going to take our job, so I'm going to categorically, shut it down, but it's here. And for you not to understand how you can utilize it to enable advancement is going to be, I think, a missed opportunity. So one of the things we're doing here at Ally is I'm working closely with our technology lead to see, and we're calling it, equity in AI. How can we make sure that the way we employ AI at Ally is equitable for all, from, maybe enhancing accessibility or creating more opportunities for folks to have access to our customer facing experience? Are we making sure that we're being thoughtful about what we're using it for and not seeing it as a threat, but seeing it as an enabler?
Got it. All right. So people out there, you don't have to be threatened by artificial intelligence. It can be an assistance and not a hindrance to us. And I think, Lauren, you brought up a really great point there is that a lot of our work is people centered, right? So with this people centered design type of work that we have, I think we are less likely to be as impacted by what AI can do in terms of workforce replacement. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have the knowledge and be able to leverage that, right, also to our benefit. So we did have a couple of questions that came in, and I'm going to pose them to both of you. So please feel free to jump in as you feel comfortable. But the first question is how can organizations remain accountable, right, to their DEI promises?
Lauren, you want to start or you want me to start?
You can start, Reggie.
Okay, I think a lot of organizations are nervous, and I think the Supreme Court ruling around affirmative action has been conflated, and now people see that there could potentially be a threat to setting targets or setting goals, because then you are putting a target on your back, quite frankly, right? You could be the next headline, or you could be the next class action lawsuit, or have someone coming after you. And I would say for us, we've never had targets, we've never had goals, but what we always have tried to do is say, how can we, one, look like the communities we are serving, look like the communities we are doing business in, and two, how can we continue to make progress from where we were last year, right? And so those are things that you can always do and hold people accountable for as an organization, because you can always look at your demographics of the communities you are serving or the communities you're doing business with. Do we look like that community? And yes or no? And why don't we look like that community? And where can we be more thoughtful? When we look at our promotions, when we look at our attrition, I mean, data is the key to success in this work. And for you to, many folks that are outside of this work think our job is to make people feel good. Yes, and if we don't lead with data and we don't create business cases, especially in the financial industry, you lose a lot of credibility when you don't have data backing what you're talking about. So for us, we take a very data-driven approach. And in that is accountability. And the other thing I would say is transparency. Be open, share your progress, share your faults with your company. And that in and of itself creates accountability. So if you haven't taken the step to share what your representation looks like, whether that's on your website, internally or externally, I think that's a very easy step to start to get accountability, because once people know you're keeping an eye on it, they're going to act differently.
Lauren?
Yeah, the one thing I would build is I agree with everything Reggie said, and I would also just add having accountability for everyone inside the organization. So, Reggie's making the point that what gets measured is what mattered, but that should also come down to performance reviews, down to incentives. Some folks in the organization, if it's not a part of their job description, if it's not a part of how I'm getting my bonus this year, that's not going to be a priority. And so if this is a true organizational priority, it really should cascade down all the way through the organization.
I love that. I love that. All right. So we have one more question, specifically as we're getting close to time here. And this is, I think, is a really good one. It's kind of related to AfroTech conference, but it is definitely in line with this topic here. Someone is asking, if I'm going into the exhibition hall, talking to organizations as a potential employee, what kind of questions should I be asking about their commitments around DE&I?
Lauren, I'm going to let you start with this one since you allowed me to start with the last one.
You're so kind. This takes me back to national MBA days and like walking into the exhibition hall and trying to think of those great questions to ask employers. Some of the things that come up for me are as an individual, I think Reggie started this super early. He said something about, did you get what we were selling you? Something to that extent.
Right.
And so if you're trying to select which organization you want to go to, you want to engage with, think about what are you as an individual passionate about? What would help you in the workplace? Those are the things that I would be curious about, asking the different DEI practitioners or the different leaders in the organization. And I'd also probably be curious about, a fun question is always, hopefully you've done your research ahead of time. So, hey, I saw on your website X, Y, and Z, but what don't I see on your website? What else is going on in the organization that is culturally relevant that might be interesting for me to know about? Because, from a risk perspective, you're not going to put everything on the org website. And there could be actually really intriguing things and programs going on inside the organization that you might not find out about just, reading job descriptions and reading their DEI page.
Nice. Ready?
No, I think doing your homework is critically important. Understand the organization, see what they are sharing on the website, and to Lauren's point, ask those additional questions. But even asking them, how are they experiencing work? If you want to be 100% remote and they're telling you they're in the office 3 days a week, okay, well, maybe that's not so. And I think too many times, at least my mental model was about the money when I first started going into an organization, and that like new car smell will wear off, and then you're stuck with whatever you purchased, right? So whatever you bought into, and I think that can be a misnomer, because that is not always, should not always be the motivator, because if you don't feel welcomed, if you don't feel like you can be yourself in that environment or be received in the way you want to be received. So a lot of it to me is about the experience. How do you experience a normal day? What is it that, what is it about your work environment that keeps you coming back? And even ask the community questions. If you're passionate about engaging in communities, ask them about, what opportunities are there to give back, whether that's as a resource, you leveraging the skills that I'm bringing to the company, or if it's just something as, I'll say as simple as, working in a food pantry. But if those things are important to you, I think taking the opportunity to interview them as much as they're interviewing you goes a long way. And sometimes it's in the form of a great question, but sometimes it's in listening to the questions that they're asking you, right? And how they're positioning the organization, and whether or not that resonates with your core, principles or what you believe your values are.
Absolutely. I hope y'all were taking notes and caught some of these gems that were thrown out there and picked them up and put them in your toolbox, right? As you get ready to go out there and advance the work that you're doing. It's been an absolutely amazing conversation. I first want to say thank you, Lauren and Reggie, for your time, for your input, for your expertise. As we get ready to wrap up, I'll start with Lauren and then Reggie. Let the people know how they can maybe connect with you and any resources that you would suggest for individuals going forward.
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn, Lauren Collins Scott. Also happy to connect via email. It's just lcollins@ideo.com. And in terms of resources, I navigate resources the same way a lot of us scroll Instagram. So once I get interested, I'll just keep clicking until I get down a rabbit hole. So if you find somebody that you're passionate about, you hear them on a podcast, just keep searching their name and looking for more podcasts. I do this a lot with all things Adrienne Marie Brown. Go listen to some of her podcasts and how she interweaves equity work and nature, and it will be deeply inspiring.
Awesome. Reggie?
Yeah, I listened to Adrienne as well. That was funny you mentioned that, but I think it is about, one, figure out the way you consume information. I love listening to a good podcast or listening to an audio book, but I do find myself drifting, and then I miss some key points, and I always have to go back. So if you find yourself as a daydreamer, I wouldn't necessarily think the podcast route. You might need paper. I know they still make books, so find a book that you can actually read, or figure out the best way to consume the information. But for me, like you said, podcasts work great. So I will take a lot of contrary views to my own views, so I understand kind of a full 360, and it's not just confirmation bias where I'm hearing what I want to hear. I'm also listening to, narratives that aren't popular to me, because I think that's important, especially in this work, because you have to understand who is it that you need to either be aware of or turn over to your side. But I can be reached on LinkedIn. It's just Reggie Willis, and unfortunately, it looks just like this. So you'll find a picture of me, or you can feel free to email me. It's reggie.willis@ally.com. But yeah, I'm always interested in engaging in this dialogue, and I learn just as much from the folks who are looking for knowledge from me. So I'm looking forward to folks reaching out and hopefully learning from you as well.
All right, awesome. So y'all know how to connect, so don't be shy. They put it out there. They let y'all know that they are willing and available to connect with you all. Again, I want to thank you for joining us in all 4 parts of this series. And just because we're on the road to AfroTech and this is the finale does not mean that we're stopping here. We want you to meet us in Austin, Texas. So November 1st through the 5th for AfroTech Conference. You can go to experience.afrotech.com to learn more, to register, to find out all the amazing things that will be happening there, as thousands of Black technologists, business professionals, DEI practitioners, entrepreneurs, everybody and their mama is going to be there. So we want you to be a part of it as well. I've been Joshua Rogers, and I'm super excited to have been a part of this. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for watching. See you in Austin.